All right.
Yeah, we're live.
All right. I'm live here on Facebook. Live on Facebook. All right.
Love it.
Let's do it.
All right. Crap. 1 second, guys. What the hell?
Little technical difficulties.
Yep. 1 second. A little technical. Oh, for some reason, my Facebook Live booted me off. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining me, Ross Marchegiani, and my partner, Miles Brooks, on Life Podcast, Limitless Info for Everyone. How we doing today, Miles?
Doing pretty good. Excited to talk about some intermittent fasting, Ross.
Absolutely. So we have an awesome guest that we get to bring on our podcast today. I'm really happy to bring this guy on. This is Dr. Justin Marchegiani. Dr. Justin Marchegiani, how are we doing today?
Well, I'm doing pretty good. I'm actually happy to be introduced by someone that has no reason to ever mispronounce my last name because you are my brother. So that is one excellent benefit of doing an interview with you guys.
Absolutely. That's pretty nice. And that's not getting screwed up. So everyone, let me just give you a quick intro to Dr. J. So Dr. Justin has way back when, I'm sure, Justin, it seems like to you, got his bachelor's from UMass University in Massachusetts, obviously, in applied exercise science. There he went to Life West Chiropractic College and received his doctorate. When was your doctorate, J-Man, or Dr. Justin?
2010.
In 2010. From there, he established his own practice in Silicon Valley, where he worked for several years, and now has moved his practice to Austin, Texas, where he's crushing it and just treating thousands upon thousands of people and making people's lives better. So we're really pumped to have you here, Dr. J.
Yeah, man, I'm glad to be here. Real excited to talk with you and Miles, and we'll drop some good knowledge bombs today and get some really good practical information out for the listeners so they can start improving their health.
Awesome. That's what we're all about, taking actionable items and putting them into our daily life. So what we're going to be talking Awesome. So what we're going to be talking about today is going to be talking about intermittent fasting. We're going to be addressing what really is going on in intermittent fasting, why we want to intermittent fast, and then we'll just be asking you some common questions that people may be running into and may want to know about or dive a little bit deeper in regards to intermittent fasting.
Right. Absolutely. So let's just kind of start off the gates. Like, what is intermittent fasting? So you kind of have fasting, which is basically starvation, right? So you kind of have fasting at a couple extremes. You have fasting like the concentration camp victims of World War II, where they were just deprived food and they were starving. And then we have a lot of what happens today where people are on fad diets, right? And they're basically starving themselves. The problem with the latter, right? The problem with the latter is you got a refrigerator with a whole bunch of food and you got a whole bunch of fast food all around you. So eventually your willpower, when you're doing the whole fasting low calorie shtick, eventually wears out, and then you succumb to all the junk food again. And the problem is when you're fasting, you actually lower your metabolism just a bit. Your body's thyroid hormone turns down, and the body does that because it is sending epigenetic signals that, hey, we are in a state of starvation. Food is not plentiful. We have to downregulate our metabolism. We have to do more with less. It's like if someone in your family loses their job, you go and you look at the financing and you decrease a lot of the budget. Maybe you were going out to eat more frequently, or you had a smartphone, and maybe you downregulate some of those expenses. With our body, we do the exact same thing. We downregulate our expenses in regards to energy. That's why when you start increasing those calories or nutrition after the fact on a yo-yo diet, you gain about 5% more of your body weight back, because you're in a regulation pattern where you're kind of budgeting those calories. So instead of being, let's say expending calories, which is a good thing in metabolism world, it may not be as good in the financial world, but when we're expending calories, we're burning it up, we're putting it towards muscle, we're putting it towards our neurotransmitters and our healthy hormones, because our body wants to have unlimited energy. So that's kind of the difference between fasting from a starvation standpoint. But then we can then shift gears and talk about the intermittent component, where we're fasting, but we're actually still getting the same amount of calories in. We're just utilizing a window of maybe 16 to 20 hours where we're decreasing food. And the whole goal of that is we're really increasing insulin sensitivity.
Yeah. Awesome. Absolutely. And I believe the main purpose is that we want to get the body shifting to using ketones and to getting into ketosis. Can you go in on that for me?
Well, the whole idea is that your body metabolically, there's a hormonal soup kind of in the background. We have insulin, we have glucagon, we have a whole bunch of other hormones, cortisol, adrenaline. We have other tertiary hormones such as hormone sensitive lipase. These are lipolytic enzymes or hormones that have an effect on how we burn fat. And so our body's kind of set up and hardwired where we either store or burn. And the hormonal milieu kind of has a major effect on that. So higher amounts of insulin will decrease our body's ability to burn free fatty acids. And we take these free fatty acids, they got like this glycerol backbone, we pull it off, and we start converting these free fatty acids into ketones, such as beta hydroxybutyrate, acetone, acetate, right? These are ketones, and these have incredible, satiating effects on the brain. So the part of the hypothalamus, the transverse nucleus of the hypothalamus, the part that controls satiety and kind of making your body feel full, that gets triggered by ketones. So when you do this kind of eating, right, where you really get the ketones up, you create a level of satiation where you start having control over your cravings. That's number one. You start increasing glucagon as well, which then helps too, because glucagon and insulin are on this inverse scale. When insulin goes high, glucagon goes low. When insulin goes low, glucagon goes high. And that helps us also utilize fuel from protein as well, which is great. And then we create this environment where we start increasing these enzymes, where we start breaking down fat. Because when insulin's high, it's nearly impossible to break down fat. Insulin basically is the conductor. It opens the door of the cell and it puts carbohydrates into the cell. And the body is kind of hardwired to deal with the carbohydrates for fuel first over the fat. All right, that's kind of how we're hardwired. That's why we have to clear out the sugar, clear out the insulin before we can go and deal with what's in the tank. The whole idea is it's like you're driving a car. What's in the carburetor, right? What's in the engine head? That fuel that's already there, the body has, or the car has to burn that fuel before it can tap into the gas in the actual gas tank. So think of the carbohydrate automatically goes right into the carburetor, into the fuel, into the engine head, and that's the fuel that's going to be used first.
That's awesome. That's great. Miles, is there anything that you would like to add or any questions that are popping up in your head right now?
Yeah, he's talking about a lot of great things. I would like to know who shouldn't do intermittent fasting.
Well, off the bat, you want to be what's called keto adapted. You want to have your metabolic machinery ready so you can start spitting out and converting a lot of the fat that you eat to ketones, right? Yep. Now, when you have hypoglycemic issues, or when you have reactive hypoglycemia, when you eat too much sugar and your blood sugar drops, or you're not used to eating lots of healthy, clean fats for fuel, and you're primarily existing off of the standard American diet. So anyone that goes to university, they're going to teach you 60 to 65% of your carbohydrates, or 60 to 65% of your food should be carbohydrates, 5 to 10% fat, typically 15 to 25% protein. With that kind of diet, your metabolic machinery will not be ready. It'll be like you having a race car and then you pulling up to the gas station and getting a whole bunch of diesel fuel put in, right? The metabolic machinery isn't right. So number one, you actually have to start getting that kind of fuel on board where you're burning fat. That's number one. Number two, if you have adrenal issues or thyroid issues, you may not be metabolically kind of dialed in yet to be burning fat for fuel. So then going 16, let's say you're doing a 16/8 or an 18/16, that's the amount of time that you fast. The bigger number is the amount of time you fast. The smaller number is the amount of time you eat. That amount of time may actually be a stressor on your body, because the fuel that you're used to consisting off of has to be in there a lot faster. So the analogy is, if you go camping and you start a fire with just twigs or maybe paper or even a little bit of gasoline, that's like utilizing more carbohydrate. That fire is going to go up fast but then out fast. We're utilizing fats for fuel, like putting the logs in the fire, which, that fire will go for 4 to 6 hours. But if you're metabolically used to twigs and paper and gasoline, you're going to be there all night keeping that fire going. So a lot of people, their metabolic fires are like twigs and paper and gasoline. So you really have to transition to the healthy logs in the fire and make sure the other metabolic machinery like the hormones and such are in a good place and stabilize symptomatically before you go into that next quandary with utilizing the intermittent fasting techniques.
Cool. Thank you very much, Justin. I think that clears up a lot for people.
Totally. Awesome knowledge so far, Dr. J. And I just want to tap back on another point to our listeners here. Justin talked about using ketones, and our real big money player here with our ketones is going to be a substance called beta hydroxybutyrate. And this is incredibly helpful to the body. It's incredibly good for producing ATP production. So that's what makes our energy produce our energy in our cells. It increases mitochondrial function. So that's what makes the ATP. It's really helpful for neuronal protection and neuronal development. So it's really good for our brain. And there's been a lot of links and studies that shown that it's helped diminish Alzheimer's and other neurodegenerative diseases such as Parkinson's. So I really want to hit on that point, that how important that is.
Well, if you just Google the term insulin or hyperinsulinism or insulin resistance, that kind of paramounts almost any disease or most diseases that are out there. I mean, if you type in cancer and hyperinsulinism, insulin is a growth cell. So, but it also has a lot of inflammatory byproducts. We need it, right? It's important. Like, we don't want to say it's bad because it's the key that unlocks the cell. And then when that cell is unlocked, we can put a whole bunch of, glucose in there and fuel. The difference is we only have about 300 grams of storage or so for glucose in our muscles. Now, that's part of the reason why exercise is helpful, because the more muscles you have, it's a bigger sponge to soak that stuff up. We only have about 60 to 70 grams of glucose in our liver. So once those storage sites actually are filled up, we actually start converting. Called de novo genesis. We start converting more of that carbohydrate into fat. So most people don't understand you can actually get fatty livers with too much carbohydrate and too much fructose. And again, it sounds kind of contradictory in your head because you're like, oh, I shouldn't eat fat because I don't want a fatty liver, right? But it's not that simple. It's the same thing with cholesterol. People don't understand that the hemomethylglutarate CoA reductase enzyme, that's the enzyme, the HMG CoA reductase enzyme, that's the enzyme that we try to block when you take a statin. That enzyme is primarily going to be stimulated not by cholesterol or fat. It's actually going to be stimulated by insulin. So you'll get your cholesterol levels jacked up really high via inflammation and via insulin. And insulin also can drive other cells to grow at abnormal rates. And with high levels of insulin, there tends to be high levels of sugar in the bloodstream or glucose in the bloodstream. Why? Just like as a kid, when you knock on that neighbor's house and then you run and hide, and the neighbor comes out and looks and says, oh, there's no one there. They know it's the kids across the street doing the whole ding dong ditch thing. So guess what happens 5 minutes later when you ring the doorbell again? No one opens the door. So that's the equivalent of that glucose staying in the bloodstream. They're not able to go inside that house, right? They have to stay out in the open. So that blood sugar goes up. And then you increase what's called free radical stress, or these things called advanced glycation end products. All that is, go to any restaurant and they bring out the creme brulee and they pull the blowtorch out and they just kind of glaze the top over and you see that browning effect. That's glycation. You're basically oxidizing these sugar-coated proteins, and that's what's happening in the microvascularity in your eyes, in your blood vessels. That's what you see gangrenous limbs and such, and all these different things that diabetics have issues with. So the whole idea is we're trying to use techniques to decrease the insulin resistance, right? Because we only have so much carbohydrate, that carbohydrate is going to be utilized by the muscles and liver. And ideally, we're going to start getting the enzymes that are lipolytic, not lipogenic, right? Lipogenic, go back to the first chapter of the Bible, Genesis, the beginning, formation. Lipogenic is basically forming fat. Lipolytic, right? Lipo being fat, lytic meaning to cut or to break down. We want to get the lipolytic enzymes, the hormone-sensitive lipase. We want to get, ideally, the adrenaline. And that's part of the reason why exercise helps burning fat, because exercise, your adrenaline levels go up 600 to 800%, which increases hormone-sensitive lipase. So you're burning a lot more fat with exercise, but you also jack up the muscle mass. More muscle mass, increase insulin sensitivity, so you need less of it to work. And also you get a bigger sponge, right? Because your muscle's a sponge, so you can sop up that glucose better. The more muscle you have, you can deal with carbohydrates better.
Awesome. That was great. And let me just real quick, a lot of people don't realize that our adipocytes are almost an organ considered itself, where they release a lot of pro-inflammatory factors such as leptin, adiponectin, monocytes, chemoattractants, and they also can release tumor necrosis factor. And these are coming and being released from our fat cells. People don't realize our fat cells actually interact with our body and have so much to do with it. So being on this fasting state and cutting this fat out is a huge plus for the reason why we do it.
Yeah. So being on a fasted state, when you break the fast, though, when you're eating that, that 8 to maybe like, let's say we're doing an 18/6. So the 18 is the amount that we fast. The 6 is the amount we eat, right? It's only 24 hours in a day. That may look like someone eating from 2 to 8 p.m. The key is, though, we want to make sure adequate calories are present because, number one, that tells our body that, hey, don't worry, there's not a famine, there's not a starvation signal here. We're not going to start converting our thyroid hormone to reverse T3, and we're not going to go into a stressed out state and start catabolizing our protein, i.e. our muscles, into sugar, right? Gluconeogenesis. We're not going to do any of that. We're going to actually just continue burning healthy fat for fuel because there's enough nutrition coming in. When we eat real whole foods, calories have nutrition, right? In this day and age, though, we can eat a whole ton of calories that actually have very little nutrition. So we want to make sure it's whole foods. Good fats are going to be coconut oil, butter, or ghee, as long as you can tolerate the dairy component there. Also, healthy fats from animal proteins. Like right now, I'm having my breakfast consists of butter coffee with some MCT oil and about 15 to 20 grams of collagen peptides. Now, collagen's great because it's primarily connective tissue amino acids. That's ligaments, tendons, cartilage, and hide, skin. Those type of amino acid profile have less gluconeogenic effects. So meaning less of that protein actually goes into glucose. So it tend to be a little bit more ketogenic proteins. It's more of the muscle meats that can drive more of the gluconeogenesis. So if I'm going to do a fast, but I don't want to cut calories because I'm still probably getting 500 or 600 calories in this drink, I can still get the calories in, still tell my body, hey, there's some satiation coming. There's a lot of butyric acid, a lot of medium chain triglycerides, octanoic acid, lauric acid, capric acid. These are all the fatty acids in medium chain triglycerides. And then also there's a lot of antioxidants and alkaloids and B vitamins in the coffee. So I'm getting a lot of signals, plus a little bit of caffeine and stimulation isn't bad when it's mixed with fat because it's time released. And that can also increase hormone sensitive lipase and put me more into a fat burning state. So these are some techniques that can be done, but 18/6, 6-hour window of eating. It's that 18 hours is where you get the benefit because you're not pulsing out the insulin as much. And fat tends to be very neutral to stimulating insulin. That's the key thing. So even if you do fat during that time frame and you want to have the calories, you can still get that insulin sparing effect.
That's awesome. That's great. So just to recap for people that may not have any idea what's going on about this intermittent fasting. So typically we want to fast in an 18-hour time period. You may be able to play with it for an hour, plus or minus. You can do a 16 if you're on the fence, a 16, because that may allow you to get to noontime. So noon to 8 would be your eating window then. Exactly. Yep. And then we typically have about a 6 to 8 hour, again, plus or minus, typically a 6-hour time window when we're going to get our normal calories that we would for that day. And Dr. J, is there anything that you do in the morning? Are you allowed to have, a little bit of fat or a little bit of food at all to get you to that afternoon feeding period?
Well, I mean, how I would do it is I would do the butter coffee and I would do just the MCT oil. That's what I would do. And if you're a little bit on the fence, you could add in some of the collagen peptides. So my line, we have the True Collagen, which is like a grass-fed, high quality peptide form that dissolves really well in the coffee. A lot of collagens that are out there that make the coffee taste like crap. I formulated this one so it blends in really well and tastes good. But that's a good way to do it if you want a little extra protein. Remember, though, that we're stacking dinner ending, let's say at 7 or 8 o'clock, we're stacking on 8 o'clock ending dinner, and then that whole entire night of not eating, right? Because breakfast is you're breaking the fast, and then ideally stacking on either a very high fat, small protein, zero carbohydrate breakfast, which ideally keeps the ketogenesis happening, or keeps the ketosis, keeps the lipolysis from happening, keep it happening, prevent the lipogenesis from happening, and then stack on top of that. Again, some people, that 16 or 18 hours of fasting may be a stressor. So if you have any active thyroid symptoms, hair loss, cold hands, cold feet, you do terrible if you skip a meal, you have a lot of fatigue and brain fog, I don't recommend that for these people. And people starting out, I recommend choosing a low stress day to try it on, because when you're stressed and you're working a heavy job, your body's going to require a lot of nutrition, B vitamins, antioxidants, and you may not necessarily get those when you're doing an intermittent fast. So we have to rely on reserves. So if you don't have a lot of nutritional reserves, we don't want to be doing that if you're starting out and if you're under a lot of stress at work.
Absolutely. Miles, is there anything that you would like to add?
Yeah, I been doing some research lately on intermittent fasting, and there's not a lot on like PubMed or Google Scholar or whatnot on trials with people in terms of females. And I've seen a lot with female rats, but nothing with female humans besides like anecdotal reports. So my big question is a lot of these studies are showing that rats are becoming masculinized, infertile, and they're missing cycles. So they're kind of pointing to that intermittent fasting may not be as beneficial for women as men. So I just would like you to touch on that, Justin, and what your clinical experience has showed you.
Yeah, so number one, females tend to be just a little bit more fragile on the hormonal perspective. And it's just because their hormones are cycling, and there needs to be this timing of hormones throughout the month for fertility and healthy hormones to be present. So how the cycle works is progesterone and estrogen fall at the end of the cycle, which triggers menses, which may last 3 to 5 days. That's the bleeding. And then what happens is the follicle starts to grow via FSH. FSH triggers an increase in estrogen. Estrogen then triggers an increase in LH, which then triggers a rise in progesterone. And that increase in estrogen followed by a rise in progesterone is what signals ovulation. Estrogen then peaks up at day 22 and then falls again and starts the whole cycle over again. And stress can create this effect with the HPA-GT axis, the hypothalamus pituitary thyroid adrenal gonadal axis, where that can decrease some of these upstream hormones, FSH, LH, and throw off some of that hormonal timing. And a lot of it's evolutionarily because, we don't want to be having children in a very stressed out, war-torn environment. It can still happen, but the body's triggered to allocate resources to surviving versus resources to growing a child, right? It's very energy intensive to grow a child. You don't want to be allocating resources to that when there's a lot of stress going on, right? So the fertility and the hormonal aspect can have an effect. Also, women in the last half of their cycle, they tend to have more blood sugar issues, more insulin sensitivity issues. So skipping meals then may not be the best thing for them from a hormonal perspective. So I always tell females, get your cycles on track, get your, 26 to 30 day kind of cycle, get your PMS under control where, it kind of sneaks up on you with your period. You don't have a ton of breast tenderness, a ton of mood issues, maybe a tiny bit, but it shouldn't be bad. And it should be over within a day or so. Get those symptoms under control. And then if you want to try a little bit of intermittent fasting, maybe go with a 16/8 first and choose a weekend day where it's less stressful. And then if you start noticing more PMS symptoms creeping up, then you may want to back it down a little bit or decrease the frequency. But again, the key component is, though, you have to make sure the calories are still consistent. If you need 1,800 calories, you're a 5'3", 130-pound, 140-pound female, you may need 1,600 calories a day. You still have to make sure those calories are getting in during that time window. I guarantee you a lot of those studies, there's probably a decrease in calories showing, and a decrease in calories will always create problems in the long run, because if you have decreasing calories, you also have a decrease in nutrition. And if your body's got to pay the bill, it's got to pay the hormone bill or the cardiovascular bill, or it's got to pay the liver bill. It pays with nutrition. It takes nutrition to run these pathways, to create the enzymes and do all those things. So your body's got to say, which bill are we going to short this month, right? And shorting a bill means decreased function, decreased optimization in those pathways, whether it's thyroid or energy or decreased liver function.
All right, thank you.
That's awesome. That's awesome, Dr. J. And I also ran across some research that intermittent fasting and some, calorie restriction has found it help improve PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, with decreasing some of the excess androgen function, decreasing our insulin growth factor, decreasing glucose, insulin sensitivity. So I've found some research. I don't know if you have any familiarity with that, with actually improving some of the symptoms and issues with PCOS.
Well, yeah, I mean, it makes sense, right? Because think about it. Like, if you start going low calorie, what are you also cutting? Like, let's say you're on a 2,000 calorie diet. Let's say it's a standard American diet, 65% carbohydrates, 10, 5% fats, 20% proteins. You're eating 2,000 calories a day. And then now you just shift it in half. Well, let's say you were doing, right, do the math, 60%, 2,000. So that means you're doing about 1,200 calories, right? 1,200 calories are carbohydrate. Now you're doing 600 calories. So if we do 600 calories divided by 4, that means your carbohydrates went from 300 grams to 150 grams. So you cut your carbohydrate in half. So of course you're going to have less carbohydrate on board. And then most people, when they start cutting calories, what sources do they start choosing to cut? Sodas, alcohol, desserts. So then what's happening is the carbohydrates they're now getting, if they're keeping that same standard American diet ratio, right, they're going to probably be more whole foods. Even if it's like mango and fruit, it's still better because there's fiber and nutrition than like soda and junk that it's just, free bound, or just to say free HFCS, high fructose corn syrup, without any fiber to blunt any of those effects. And plus there's no nutrition coming in.
Yep.
Does that make sense? So of course you're going to get some benefits, but long term, you're going to have a lot of negative effects, because once the insulin sensitivity is there, your thyroid hormone is going to start going down and your metabolism will start going up. And if you haven't created healthy habits, because that's an unsustainable vehicle to get where you're going, right? Everyone in Auschwitz lost weight, all right? Everyone in these concentration camps lost weight. But the problem is, I mean, you look at them when they come back home, right? Or someone when they break a yo-yo diet fast, they gain 5% back, right? So there's metabolic effects, there's metabolic consequences that you can't avoid.
Yep. That's awesome. And then some confusion, or maybe some of our viewers might be wondering, so there are kind of different type of intermittent fasting. We have our alternate day fasting, which has shown to help with chronic diseases. We have our more traditional fast, which could be anywhere from 24 to 72 hours, which sounds ridiculous to me. And then we also have cortisol like restriction diets. How do these compare when we're looking at our intermittent fasting diet?
Well, the difference is, like, if you go listen to my podcast with Jimmy Moore, he has this complete guide to fasting with Dr. Jason Fung, who's a nephrologist, kidney doc. They talk about a lot of fasting, which is doing around 200 to 300 calories a day. Okay. They do also a lot of bone broths and a lot of minerals, because they understand that you need some minerals and you probably need some nutrition coming in there from at least the electrolyte standpoint. That's important. So they do 200 to 300 calorie a day fasting. Now, the benefit you get from that is you have an extreme caloric deficit. You can really help with a lot of insulin resistance issues fast. The problem is, what do you transition to after that? Because that's unsustainable. And I consider that a total fad. I much rather get someone doing an intermittent fast and getting an adequate amount of calories during that 6 to 8 hour window of food. I'd rather do that because, well, number one, it's easier to go 6 hours when you wake up without eating versus a day or 2 or 3. Plus, you can't really function as much. You're not going to be able to go out in the backyard and garden or do the chores. Not as much as you could, because your body's going to start creating a lot of stress hormones to start utilizing fuel and more adrenaline and such, because it needs to get that access to that fuel. So there's going to be catabolic effects on the muscle tissue doing that. So I'm not a huge fan of it. I understand the benefits of it. I understand why some people are biased to it or like it. But for me, it's unsustainable. And I think it may not be bad if people have a lot of gut issues and a lot of food allergy issues. It may not be bad to give the gut a break for a few days, mainly from that perspective. So a lot of people that feel good, I think they're just giving their digestive system a break. If your gut's like really inflamed, like you're an ulcerative colitis person or a lot of gut inflammation, you may benefit from a couple days without any food and doing a liquid kind of support, but not necessarily from the effects that most people are thinking, like the fasting effects, more from the food allergy and just giving the digestive system a break kind of effects.
That is awesome. I think that was some great information that he nailed right there. Specifically, really getting control of that insulin sensitivity quickly. That's awesome. So, Justin, Dr.
We
J.
just have to understand one's unsustainable and we need to have a transitional path, and the other one's sustainable. But even with the sustainability aspect of intermittent fasting, I don't recommend it every day. If you think about ancestors killing, let's say, an animal, we have food, plenty for a few days, maybe a few weeks, and then there's time periods of fasting. So, there wasn't this intermittent fasting thing from an evolutionary perspective. So I think punctuating it in there every once or twice a week's great. Like last night for dinner, my wife and I went out. I had some lobster and asparagus and mushrooms, and I had some like really nice like lobster bisque, like heavy cream soup. So it was like really high fat, probably 70 to 80% fat. Carbohydrates primarily only from vegetables, and I'd want like 2 glasses of very dry champagne with activated charcoal. So this morning, I'm just doing butter coffee, MCT, and I'm not going to eat till probably 2 o'clock this afternoon. I also added a little bit of collagen in here too. So that's kind of how you can punctuate it and add it in.
That's awesome. And I swear you just read my mind, because I was just going to go, how often do we want to be doing this? So just to recap there for our listeners, typically every 2 weeks, Dr. J?
I would say if you're healthy, symptomatic wise, I would say once or twice a week is going to be great. Just choose a less stressful day. What I like to do is this. Figure out with your spouse or your partner what you want to do on the weekend. Find a restaurant you want to go to on a Saturday or Sunday. Do an early dinner like at 3, 4 o'clock. And then that night before, you fast, and then build up that appetite for that really awesome dinner you're going to go to that Saturday or Sunday, late afternoon, early dinner time. That way, you have something to look forward to. You can really get a good amount of calories when you're there, not have to worry about it as much. You're building up that insulin sensitivity, right? So that's a good way to do it, because then you can use that lack of eating for that day and build it up so you can look forward to something later on that night.
Totally. That's awesome. And then real quick, I know you hit about like doing calorie restriction or fasting that's really helpful to getting that gut healthy. Also, are you familiar at all with fasting introduce adipose factors that feed the bacteria?
Say it one more time. So fasting adipose factors?
Fasting-induced adipose factors. Asprey talks about it in his book, how it feeds the bacteria and helps actually diminish and lower adipose tissue.
Well, I mean,
in a starved state.
Is it like what are these adipose factors? Are they ketone based? What are they coming from?
I believe they're ketone based. They're made by the liver when we're in a fasting state.
Yeah, it's probably some kind of ketone byproduct. I mean, there's lots of research showing that going too low carb can change some of the bacteria and skew the bacteria in the gut. It can affect the Firmicutes and Bacteroides ratio. It can affect some of these other bacteria, the Roseburia bacteria in the gut. So sometimes adding a little bit of starch in there can be helpful. Again, if you can tolerate legumes, or a little bit of legumes, fine. Or it can be resistant starch like unripened plantain flour, or if there's no autoimmune implications, cooled potato flour as well. So, some of those can be helpful on the flip side when you're actually eating to feed some of that bacteria. But I mean, that makes sense, because a lot of the dysbiotic bacteria tends to like the easy to digest carbohydrates. So it makes sense that when you pull away the easy to digest carbohydrates, you get a starvation effect with a lot of the dysbiotic bad stuff. And then the ketones have an effect on nourishing some of the good stuff. So that makes a lot of sense.
That's awesome. Thank you. And I just wanted to reiterate to our listeners, even though we're thinking about burning fat and we're thinking about all these other cellular factors, our gut has such a huge influence, and we're affecting our gut in a positive way, in a positive direction, just by intermittent fasting. Miles,
and I would say that if you're having benefits by doing fasting, whether it's a 200 to 300 calorie fast where you're just not eating at all for a very long period of time, I would look at really making the food more hyper palatable. Like bone broth, soups, kind of a GAPS-like approach, make the food easier to process and easier to digest. So that way your body can access more of that nutrition easier, because, you know, it creates a stressor in the gut. If you have good foods that are in there and you can't break it down, that food ferments, it putrefies, it acidifies, and that can create a lot of, you know, uncomfortable gases and dysregulations and motility and constipation or diarrhea. So we really want to make sure we can access a lot of that good food. So if you are doing fasting and you're noticing benefits, you really want to make sure that you make that food easier to digest. Maybe follow a GAPS or a specific carbohydrate kind of diet, peel your food, cook it, avoid the raw, up the HCl and enzymes to make that food easier to process and digest.
That's awesome. That's great. Miles, is there anything that you have burning on the top of your head right now that you'd like to ask Dr. J?
Yeah. Today and like nowadays, we have this stigma like, yeah, I'm overweight, I should try intermittent fasting. And that's what I see with like a few of my friends, a few people in school. And I even see kids recommending that, or future doctors be recommending like intermittent fasting for weight loss. And I get that, how that works. And I think everybody has a better understanding now listening to you. But let's just say you're a guy like Ross and you're lean, you have muscle mass, and why would intermittent fasting be good for somebody that doesn't want to lose weight and just wants to try it, or, you know, they're missing the edge in their athletic step or in their day? Why would somebody else that isn't trying to lose weight want to do intermittent fasting?
Well, there's some benefits on the cellular autophagy side where you're recycling proteins, which can have some anti-aging effects. It also has some positive effects on decreasing mTOR, which is a mammalian target of rapamycin, which has effects of decreasing it, but then it creates the cellular rebound. So then you actually increase protein synthesis, i.e., decreasing mTOR, then spikes mTOR, which then increases muscle growth. So there's that aspect. There's the anti-aging cellular autophagy, which can have some positive effects on the telomeres, which are the little caps on our DNA shoelaces, if you will. So that there. And then also potentially increasing insulin sensitivity even more, which may have even more beneficial effects on fat loss. So maybe if someone's at a 12 or 13% body fat, that may be what gets them to a 10 or 11. Right. Okay. So it's just something you have to try. I mean, when you're already healthy, it takes a lot to move the needle, right? Because you're already doing a lot of the foundational things. So that may be one of those tools you can put in your metabolic tool bag that may be able to help you move the needle a little bit more. And then it's also something that's a good tool if, let's say, you have a binger night on a Friday, right? You may utilize that tool of intermittent fasting Saturday to help recover and get the insulin sensitivity back from maybe too much alcohol and carbohydrates the night before. So it's also a tool bag to help with recovery too.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
That was awesome, Miles. That's exactly where I wanted to go for my next little bit of information. So again, just to recap, we're going to, in intermittent fasting, we're going to at first decrease our mTOR. And like Dr. Justin said, it's going to slingshot back up when we start to eat food. And that mTOR is what's going to make our muscles grow. And then as far as the cellular autophagy, so just think about this as your body collecting all the garbage, so our dead organelles, other tissues, other oxidated structures, and it's going to use it for energy. So Dr. J, can you just give us a real quick recap, the quick key points, the take-home points that our viewers can take home?
Yeah, absolutely. So number one, get a diet that's going to help transition you to becoming a fat burner. All right. Now, if you're overweight and you're insulin resistant, how do you know that? Well, your waist is greater than 40 inches for a male, 35 for a female. You got an imbalanced hip to waist ratio, i.e. your tummy sticks out more than your hips. Those are pretty good signs that you have insulin resistance. Get your carbohydrate under control. Typically drop it down to a 30 to 50 gram kind of net carb range. Get the insulin sensitivity going, really up the fat, get the protein at a moderate level, maybe half a gram per pound of body weight a day. 200-pound guy, 100 pounds of protein, 130-pound female, maybe 65 grams of protein. It's a pretty good rule of thumb. So typically a palm to a hand size 3 times a day will get you enough. And again, if you're doing a lot of exercise, you may have to dial in up the carbohydrate a little bit, maybe at least post-workout to help with some of the glycolytic movements that are dependent more upon carbohydrates. But the people that are having issues, they're on the insulin resistant side. So get the diet dialed in to help with the insulin resistance, start becoming a fat burner. And then once a lot of your symptoms are stabilized, make sure there's no thyroid or adrenal issues or active significant gut issues. And then you can start working on the tool of intermittent fasting in between, but get a diet that's going to start pushing you to become a fat burner first. And then if you have active hormone issues, then see a really good functional medicine doc that can help fix those underlying body system dysfunctions, whether it's adrenal, hypothyroidism, or if it's an autoimmune issue like Hashimoto's, or active gut issues, whether it's infections or just poor digestion or IBS or other autoimmune issues with the gut like Crohn's or ulcerative colitis. Get those issues fixed first, and then you can start working on that tool. But the intermediary change is just getting the carbohydrates down, getting most of your carbohydrates from vegetables, small amounts from fruit, small amounts from safe starches, and then kind of dial it in from there.
That's awesome. Miles, are there any other questions you'd like to ask Dr. J before we send off?
Yeah, I just want to, in your opinion, and you're based on your years of experience, does somebody just go out and try to intermittent fast themselves, given the knowledge of this podcast, or is it worth it to go to a functional medicine doctor or a master's in nutrition chiropractor? Is it worth it to seek out professional advice?
It all depends on kind of where you're at. Like if you're already really healthy and your symptoms are relatively under control, the first thing I would do is, just get your diet shifted to the one that I mentioned before. And again, the carbohydrates may be negotiable based on your height and your weight and your activity level. Okay. That's number one. If you have a lot of symptoms, then you'd want to see someone to get that dialed in, because there's a lot of pitfalls and a lot of brainwashing that a lot of people do, such as, not eating the quality of food, right? They budget it out and they eat a whole bunch of crappy meat, crappy vegetables. They're maybe eating a whole bunch of soy and other things. So from a macro perspective, it may look good, but from a quality or macronutrient or micronutrient perspective, it may look terrible. So again, if you have a lot of symptoms, you really want to see a good functional medicine doc, chiro nutritionist doc first to really get that dialed in. So it always depends on where you're at. The more symptoms, the more help you're going to need. And a lot of times there's a lot of bad habits that are embedded. So people are making unconscious poor decisions, and there's a lot of self-sabotage going on too.
Okay.
That's awesome. Thank you, Dr. J. And again, just for our viewers, take home points here. Get the body systems correct. Get the adrenals on track. Get the liver working correctly. Get your gut healthy. Get the thyroid working correctly. Seek out practitioners like Dr. J. And then you can start diving in and playing around with intermittent fasting, making sure you're eating your calories in that 6 to 8 hour time period, making sure we're fasting for that 18 hours, and really getting the benefit of intermittent fasting. Is that really, if you want to capitalize that?
Absolutely. And if you want to intensify it too, you can time your exercise just before the fast breaks. Because like I mentioned, you increase some of that adrenaline, which increases the free fatty acids, which increases the hormone sensitive lipase. That can be very beneficial. Like let's say you're breaking your fast at noon, you may want to exercise from 11 to noon or 11:30 to noon, but you probably want to come right afterwards with some good carbohydrates, healthy carbohydrates post-workout to jack up the insulin, which will then drive the adrenaline and cortisol down. And the insulin can have some beneficial effects of driving that protein into the muscle too. So those are some other little tips that you can kind of add in with how you're applying the intermittent fasting.
That's awesome. And then for those lugheads, jacking up that mTOR to get our muscle going.
That's it. Little slingshot, baby.
That's right. So Dr. J, for our listeners, how can they reach out to you? How can they get access to you? Can you let us know?
Yeah, check out my podcast over at justinhealth.com. There's a little podcast button, or you can go to beyondwellnessradio.com. That'll bring you right to the podcast page. Check out, when you're there, my YouTube channel. Again, I got about 30,000 subscribers, hitting the number 30,000 today, which is really exciting. It's taken me about 4 or 5 years to get there, but we're rocking and rolling. We're dropping knowledge bombs all day long, trying to get people empowered, health information right at your fingertips so you can apply it. So those would be some good resources there. And if they need to reach out to me at all, I see patients, worldwide via Skype and phone. And when you're at justinhealth.com, there's a button there where you can work with Dr. J or schedule a consult, and I'm available to help everyone out.
That is awesome, Dr. J. Well, we really appreciate your time and giving us your knowledge and dropping some bombs on us about intermittent fasting. I really appreciate it.
And I'm really happy you did not mispronounce our last name, because I would have to give you some serious paleo demerits on that one. Okay.
That would have been rough. That would have been rough. But thank you for our viewers for listening and checking out what we offer. And thank you again, Dr. J, for joining us. And Miles, like always, crushing it, man.
Thanks a lot, Miles and Ross. Really appreciate it, guys.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.